Hello everyone, this is Christina from Pixiedrops Backdrops, and we're here with another composite. And today's project is this outdoor scene that I captured when I was living on Vancouver Island. This is the lovely and amazing Cathedral Grove. It's an old world forest full of ferns and moss and all these amazing lovely textures that photographers love. So the first thing that I like to do if I'm going to do a composite for a client is actually I choose my backdrop first before I ever do the shoot, or have the parents choose the backdrop before we do the shoot. And the second step in preparing to do the shoot is to figure out the direction of light and the colors and tones and whatnot that are in the backdrop so that we can make life super easy when we go to composite and end up with a very believable final product. So first things first, we like to look for the direction of light, and this is a little bit tough. In an old world forest, the trees are absolutely huge. I think some of them are 200 feet, and the canopy is quite thick, so there's not a heavy directional light. It's quite diffuse. But one of the giveaways that we can see here in this image is there's a shadow falling here, and I can see a shadow falling here on this side of this twig. So that lets me know that the light direction is actually coming from this way, top and left. And so when I go to shoot the subject, I'm going to light in the same manner so that I have a very seamless transition. As well, there's moss here in where the subject is going to go. And so I wanted to make for that seamless blend, and so I went out to my local craft store and bought myself some moss. And once I got baby positioned, I tucked some moss in around her, and then there's some dark shadowing in the back here, and I thought, well, why don't I just throw a black blanket in behind her so I have that nice casting that would match this backdrop. And again, this is all just to make your life easier. You can certainly use these backdrops if you haven't shot specifically for them, but I find it's just easier, it's faster if you shoot for the backdrop, and second, it's a much more believable edit, and it's going to cause you way less time in the editing bay if you can just blend in this moss with this moss instead of building moss from the backdrop onto the subject. Also, when I shot this, because of the diffuse lighting in the backdrop, I made sure I had the light quite a ways away from baby, and I had it above and turned a little bit more towards her than I normally would in a regular shoot, just to try to mimic the lighting in the backdrop. So with all that said, let's go ahead and grab our subject. So I'm just going to use the lasso tool and make a pretty rough selection around her, and I want to keep this moss because I put it there on purpose so I could make life easier when I was editing. The other thing about shooting specifically for your backdrop is that you're going to have really believable shadows already created for you, because the layer that you're going to be using is going to remain in your final edit. And so you don't have to create shadows, they're already there for you. So once we have the selection, we're going to Control C and Control V to make a copy. And then I'm just going to grab her, move her over to our backdrop, and release the mouse. Obviously, she's quite a bit too big in this scene, so I'm going to Control T, and I'm going to grab the corner and hold down the Shift key to maintain the aspect ratio as I'm resizing so that she doesn't look all wonky. All right. So I'm going to just turn down the opacity on her layer so I can see exactly if I like the placement. I'm going to hit the Z key or Z, and then that's for zoom, and then drag right to zoom in nice and tight so we can see what we're doing here. Okay, I'm just going to resize this down a little bit so she's tucked right in there. Let's see, maybe I like her up a little bit higher, sort of floating on the moss. And I'm going to tilt it just so slightly so that her face is a little bit more of the focal point. And down a little bit. I think I'm pretty happy with that, so I'm going to click the check mark, turn the opacity back up, and see what we think of that. I think she's still a little bit too big, so I'm going to bring her down again. All right. Hit that Z key again and drag left to zoom out. And first thing that I can see here is she's quite a bit too bright for this scene. So one way we can fix that, we can go to Filter and Camera Raw Filter and just bring the exposure down. Maybe even all the way to right there. And right away, that's just a much better exposure for her. I'll go into my history palette here and show you. I'll click up. Far too bright. So right there, we've already fixed this problem. And we can tweak that a little bit later if we decide we want to. Next thing we're going to do here is create a layer mask for the baby and come over to the black and our brush, and then we're going to just slowly paint this off to blend all this in with the backdrop. I have a very specific way of doing this. I like to have my brush at a pretty low opacity and flow, and I like to massage in around just a little bit at a time, and having my brush turned down gives me the ability to do that. If I have it at 100%, then it's boom, it's gone. But if I have this turned down, then I can just massage in ever so gently, a little bit at a time, and then reveal a little bit of the backdrop while leaving a bit of the subject layer. So I'm going to go ahead and start. And I'm using the left bracket key to reduce the size of my brush. And I'm just going to come in here and start painting off that subject layer. And again, we're really ahead of the ball game here by using moss when we shot the subject. The blend is just much more believable, seamless, and quick. I might actually move her down. Just going to grab this, select, and move her down into this backdrop a little bit further. I like that better. That's going to be a nicer blend. Back over to the brush key, or brush tool. And just slowly but surely painting it off. If you can hear that scratching, that is my pen and tablet. I use the Wacom pen and tablet to do editing, and I wouldn't change that for the world. It really saves my wrist. I have carpal tunnel pretty bad from years and years of shooting weddings and holding very heavy gear out for my body for hours and hours on end. So when I'm doing editing now, I'm using a pen and tablet, and that really helps me from the pain of carpal tunnel with using a mouse. And not only that, I can make a little bit finer adjustments, I find, with my pen and tablet. It does take a little bit of getting used to, but once that learning curve is over, it's pretty amazing. I'm going to go ahead and turn this back up a little bit just to blend this black in a little bit more smoothly, and right bracket key to increase the size of my brush. We don't want to take away the entire subject layer because it has that nice dark tone, and it's going to give us those believable shadows that we were looking for, so we don't have to add them in another layer. So I can see that I've actually taken off a bit too much of her face here. So hit the X key to come back over to the white, go back to the brush tool, and we're just going to add that back. White to reveal and black to hide. Okay, let's have a look. That's already looking like a very lovely blend, and I'm really pretty happy with that. I'm just going to make a few adjustments right in here and here where there's a bit of brightness on the moss, so I might just blend that layer down a little bit more. X, back to the black to hide. So that moss, this bright moss, is actually from the backdrop layer. So I might paint in on her layer, cover that up. Okay. So I think in order to get a bit more of a believable blend here, I'm actually going to steal some of this moss from right here and lay it in here so that it has a bit more seamless blending with that moss in the subject layer. So I'm going to hit the background layer and my clone tool, bring brush size down, and Alt and click on the point of the backdrop that you want to sample, and then I'm just going to paint it in there. Again, Alt and click, and that's going to get me the moss I was looking for. Okay, I went too far there. So what I can do is use this history brush tool and just remove that. Lovely. And if we want, we can add a little bit from here, back over to the clone stamp tool. And I'm going to just put a little bit in here. A little bit more here. I really like these big pieces. They have some nice brightness to them and add some visual interest. Okay, let's zoom out again and see. Much, much better. I like that a lot more. I'm really pretty happy with the way that this is looking. I am going to add a curves layer to the baby just to make her pop a little bit more in this scene. So we're going to add a curves layer, and I'm going to clip it to the baby layer so that when I make this adjustment, it doesn't adjust the entire scene. So I'm just going to pull down on the bottom part of the curve, darken her a little bit more, and then I'm going to pull up on the top, and this is going to give me a nice contrast. It's really going to pop her out of the backdrop. I think I went a little too far on the bottom there, so I can just make that adjustment. Excellent. So here it is before the curves layer, after the curves layer, and I think that just gives us a little bit more punch when it comes to the final product. Just going to see if I can adjust the shadowing in the background here a little bit more. So I'm going to paint off the baby layer to reveal a little bit more here. Get a bit more of a blend. There are shadows already there in the backdrop. Okay, that I went too far. I'm actually going to turn the opacity right down here so I can just take off a tiny bit of the shadow at the end of her foot, but I don't want to remove too much of it. All right. Beautiful. I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a layer, and I'm going to darken down the shadowing in the back here a little bit. So I'm going to copy this background layer, and then I'm going to Alt-click on Layer Mask to show a black layer mask, and then I'm going to go to Multiply. And Multiply is going to darken down all of the parts that I'm going to reveal. So choose the white and my brush, increase brush. And I do have my brush turned down quite a bit. I'm going to zoom right in here so you can see what I'm doing. And we're going to add some more shadowing in here. And that's just going to give a little bit more believable blend. Again, that's what we're excuse me, that's what we're always looking for, is this believable? Okay, so you can see the change that I made there. I'm just going to hide that and reveal. And I'm really happy with that. So we're going to call that good. And if all you were interested in was watching me add the subject, you can exit the video now. I'm actually going to take a few minutes and add some light streams if you'd like to stick around to watch that. And if not, there you have it. A pretty quick and easy way to add a subject to a backdrop, having planned it out first, and we have a lovely and believable edit at the end. All right, for those of you who are sticking around, I'm going to add a new layer here, and I'm going to fill it with black, and then I'm going to grab my brush tool and a warm tone, sort of yellowy orange, gold, I guess. And I'm going to turn my brush down here, and I'm just going to paint I'm going to add another layer there on top of that. I'm going to paint on some streaks of light. Light rays. And they don't have to be super perfect or amazing. So we're going to blend these together. I'm going to add a bit more up in the top here. We're mimicking it. We're going to take got the ruler showing up there. We don't need the guide. Okay, let's come back in here. We're painting sun sort of a situation here. All right, I'm going to click on this painted layer and I'm going to go to Filter, Blur, Motion Blur, and we want it to come as sort of the same direction as we believe the light was coming. Got a fairly good distance here. Okay, and then we're going to also blur and Gaussian blur. I'm going to turn it right up. I want a nice blur here. Okay, and we can play with this when we get it into the backdrop image. So I'm going to select both these layers and I'm going to go ahead and pin them together, Control E. All right, now I'm going to bring this down here above our backdrop layer. And then I'm going to go to Screen. And that's going to add the light into our backdrop, as you can see. And I can move it around. It's a very subtle change, but it's going to give some depth to this photo that we didn't have. Let's back out so we can take a look at what we're doing. Really liking that effect. And if you want to multiply this effect, go ahead and copy the layer. There, you have double the light coming in. And maybe if you want a really strong amount of light coming through your image, then you want that much. I think that's a bit much. I'm going to turn down the second copy. I might actually turn up, just delete that second copy for now. We're going to play with this first. I think what I'll do is I'm just going to Control T and I'm going to make sure that this light is reaching the edge. And obviously I want a bit of the light to come across baby's face. So one of those light rays is coming across her face. Perfect. If I want to add some more up in this area here, I can come in with my brush, make a nice big diffuse brush, turn it way down, and we're just going to click in here because this is where the sun would be originating. And I'm pretty happy with that. I might go ahead and just streak one across the scene on my own. If I don't like it, I can go back just like that. And I think it's a little bit too much, so I'm going to turn my brush down again and then all the way through. And again, if you don't like it, try again. It's the beauty of Photoshop. You can play around Have a good time. Come up with your own personal aesthetic. I don't like that one. Okay, let's have a look at what this looks like before and after. Just gives it that slightly more magical feel. And I might add a little bit more light over here. Just going to add those streaks. All right, I'm happy with this. I'm going to zoom in here to see what this looks like up close. Beautiful. And I think what's happened here, when we've added the light streak across the baby, it's just shown a little more shadowing here than I might like. So I'm going to go back to the baby layer and I'm going to brush that off. It's the small details that are really going to tell on you when you're doing compositing. I can see here a blend that I needed to do on the baby layer as well. Just going to come in here, brush this off, turn that right up. X to get the white back so I can paint back her face. Back to the black. I'm even moving into her outfit a little bit here just to get a nicer blend. All right, we're going to zoom back out. Very lovely. All right, so you may have been happy with just the composite itself, and then if you want to add a little extra touch, you can go ahead and add those light layers for a bit more depth. You can add other subjects in here if you like. You could put some forest animals, you could put some mushrooms, you can do whatever you want. The sky's the limit. All right, I want to thank everyone for watching this tutorial, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask.